It's between us.
The number one podcast in the world.
This is
the JBU.Show featuring Austin
from the Miller Talk Podcast,
ALLAN,
the American Sincerist,
and now your host,
Cam Allen.
All right, guys, welcome, everybody. Today we're doing a book review of The American Gospel by John Meacham. We're starting out in the intro only, and for copyright purposes, I can't just read it to you, but I've picked some parts out, and we've got some ways of making this fun, I believe. So, Chris, you want to give your comments on it so far? He's read some of it, so if you do want to get this book and read along with us, it is American Gospel by John Meacham, JON MEACHAM.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it definitely wasn't what I expected. And it's obviously, I mean, as the title implies, right, it's talking a lot about religion in the founding era and how the founding fathers looked at religion. And we're only covering the introduction tonight, correct?
Yes, just the introduction.
Okay.
And next time will be chapter 1.
And it, sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Hang on. Great timing for that. Sorry, guys. Oh, thank you. Yes. I love it when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have quite a bit of notes, and we'll get into them a little bit as we get into the details here. But just kind of overall, I didn't find anything egregiously wrong with how he's setting this up. I do think that he is coming at this from a very secularist or even atheist point of view, and he's trying to come to an outcome a little bit of the founding fathers were religious, but didn't want to impose religion on anybody, and that kind of angle, a more leftist angle, basically. And I might be wrong. You know, the book might prove me wrong to that, but that's kind of what it feels like he's setting up, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's where I'm at through the introduction, is about the same thing. I bought the book thinking, I mean, I don't know really exactly what I thought. It's kind of fulfilling the purpose I wanted from it so far, but also I just don't know if I agree with this guy, which is fine. You know, he's allowed to have his own perspective of the events that happen. So, but
Sure.
that's why I kind of wanted to do this, is so the audience can learn something. It can help me learn and just discuss it and
See what
figure
happens
out.
here.
Yeah. Because I don't know, maybe we get to the end of it and we're like, oh yeah, he made a pretty good point, you know? So it seems it's about 250 pages long is what we figured out.
I got one more thing I want to say. I don't know about your copy, but the copy that I got, I'll tell you, this does not inspire confidence. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. He took 4 pages at the beginning and used them to post praise for the American Gospel, meaning quotes from random people praising the book. And, you know, usually people put that on the cover or whatever to try and entice you to read it. But it doesn't inspire confidence when you need to have all your buddies hop on there and praise you before you start the book.
I kind of saw like Washington Post, Los Angeles Times.
Yeah, let's see.
And I kind of USA Today, and I was just kind of like, I don't want to read those.
Let's see what the Los
Honestly.
Angeles let's see what the Los Angeles Times says real quick, because that'll probably
All
tell
right.
us what angle he's coming from. It says a sensibly balanced and engaging narrative account of religion's role in the nation's history. So they like it. So that's probably not good. I wouldn't get my hopes up. Anyway, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's about 250 pages long. It's got a very long appendix and source notes, like 160 some pages of source notes and appendix and everything. So not terribly long book.
I will
but-
say, I appreciate some of the quotes he picked out.
Mm-hmm. I do say I have a lot. So far it has been a good read. I'll say that, you know.
I've definitely read worse. Do you want to start with
Here's kind of the opening.
Yeah, the quotes he starts with there?
It does have pictures in it too, so you know, for the picture book guys, this is still a book for you.
Marines can still read it, is what he said.
Yes. We've got the introduction. It says American Gospel, Faith and Freedom. You want to read the first Thomas Jefferson quote, and I'll do the second one?
Of course I do. The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time. Thomas Jefferson, A Summary View of the Rights of British America, July 1774.
That's an interesting way to start the book, you know.
I don't know a much better way.
Religion and liberty must flourish or fall together in America. We pray that both may be perpetual. Reverend William Smith, D.D., in a sermon preached at Christ Church, Philadelphia on Friday, June 23rd, 1775, the day George Washington left the city to take command of the Continental Army.
Let's talk about that idea real quick. Religion and liberty must flourish or fall together in America. Do you generally agree with that sentiment?
Yeah.
I do as well, and I think that, we've talked about many times, the problems that we see today stem a lot from the fall of religion in the United States.
Yeah. But can you just imagine what that sermon must have been like? The atmosphere of that time? And he just drops that on you? Man. And then you ride off, command the Continental Army on a horse. It's interesting. I think it sets a great tone for the book, just those two. Which is why I say I kind of like this guy. He does pick pretty good quotes. So I think I may read just the first paragraph of the introduction. And then we may talk about that. And then I'll move on to some other stuff.
Okay.
As the sad news from the house on the hill reached town, the courthouse bell in Charlottesville tolled the tribute. Thomas Jefferson was dead, succumbing at 10 minutes to 1 on the afternoon of Tuesday, July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Secretive and ambitious, brave and curious, committed to liberty, the Enlightenment, and the American experiment, Jefferson was among the most eloquent and forceful of the founders on the fraught subject of religion. Intellectually daring, Jefferson had little time for the intricacies of creeds, talk of miracles, and the familiar tenets of the faith that grew out of the life for believers, resurrection of Jesus. I am a sect by myself, as far as I know, Jefferson said.
That is pretty true.
You know Jefferson pretty well. Is that pretty accurate description?
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty accurate description. And he was probably the most forceful of the founding fathers, as he was kind of alluding to there. I mean, he said, but not directly, in separation of church and state. Of course, the phrase separation of church and state, as we learn a little farther down in this intro, and most of us know, comes from Thomas Jefferson. Now, most people think it comes from the Constitution. That is not the case. In fact, it actually comes from a private letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote, which is why the way that it has been extrapolated today into some de facto law is absurd. It doesn't exist. This was literally a private letter, and there are many private letters where we obtain good information regarding the Second Amendment, for example. There's a private letter between, I believe it's George Washington, and a ship owner that tells us that the Second Amendment is far broader than just firearms. It includes cannons, it includes any weaponry that the government has, essentially. So it's not that we can't get good information from these letters, but as he just said, Jefferson himself, in that quote, he's in a sect of his own. Jefferson was alone in his view of religion in the country. Now, his view influenced a lot of the ultimate decisions that were made as far as the Constitution, as far as religion, and the influence it had, but he was certainly himself far more radical in it than most of the founders, and then we ended up going with. Probably a lot more than he would have wished, or rather, he probably would have wished that we went a lot further. He was much more libertarian in the sense, we'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And as we go a little farther here, I've got plenty of notes on that, but
Yeah, I guess then that brings us to the next one, which is nothing was simple about Jefferson, and nothing is simple about the debates over religion in public life nearly 2 centuries after him. Neither conventionally devout nor wholly unbelieving, Jefferson surveyed and staked out an American middle ground between the ferocity of evangelizing Christians on one side and the contempt for religion of secular philosophies on the other. The right would like Jefferson to be a soldier of faith, the left an American Voltaire. He was, depending on the moment, both and neither. He was, in other words, a lot like many of us. I think that's interesting how he says the left and the right, like Jefferson, but for different reasons.
yeah.
Basically,
Yeah, and of course, I can't deny that in my opinion, I think that the modern left in the United States has bastardized a lot of the founding fathers, a lot of our founding, a lot of the Constitution. But it's not to say that everything Jefferson ever said or everything the founders ever said is stuff I agree with. There are things that are more leftist than I'd prefer them to be that are part of this country, right? And that's part of their ingeniousness, was the fact that they were able to they were able to find the truth so effectively that it could not be denied by any side, I think is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just having all
You have
kinds
to
of trouble
remember
tonight.
when we're talking about this point in America that the founding fathers existed in, we have to take it back to how this part of America was founded, because this is mostly the revolution ignites through Virginia and South Carolina, right there in the upper northeast parts. New York is where constitutional conventions were held, right? So that's where Europeans, or the UK, that's where the UK, Britons, immigrated to or came to, settled in. and they came over with very different sects of Christianity. We had the Puritans and Quakers, which Benjamin Franklin was a Quaker.
Catholics.
Yeah.
Later, but there was still the influence.
What were some of the other ones that came on?
Don't turn to me.
There's Puritans. There's one that was basically just like non-dominational. I can't remember what they're called.
Sectarians or whatever.
No, dang it.
That's not the right word.
I should have prepared.
Well, that's
better,
what they are, though, isn't it? I mean, they believe in God. They believe in one God. They believe in the Christian God, technically, but they don't believe in most of the specific tenets of any particular religion. And that's what Jefferson was a sectarian. I don't know if that's the correct word, but...
Yeah, basically I don't know, but the point is there was a bunch of different sects of Christianity that came over. And so they all had varying beliefs of things like the Trinity, or just, so there was lots of debate going on just about Christianity. And
well, and
that's what's going on during this time. So yes, they all had their differing views on what Christianity was, but at the end of the day, a majority of them still believed in Jesus,
Yeah, and it's right at the peak of the Enlightenment, and so you also have science kind of coming into it as well, which is part of what spurs all the debate, because it goes from kind of faith because the king told us we had to have faith to, well, do I actually believe this or not? And they do actually believe it, but they're trying to figure out what the most appropriate way to both believe in God, to move forward with the religion and their belief in God, as well as how that applies to government and governing a country. And is that a place for government? Is that, how much influence should the church have, and how much influence should God have over the country? And that distinction between how much influence should God have versus how much influence the church should have is very important going forward. I highlighted in the next paragraph here, he said, in the opening years of the 21st century, some Americans believe the country has strayed too far from God. Others fear that zealots from the White House to the school board are waging holy war on American liberty. And many, if not most, seem to think that we are a nation hopelessly divided by religion. None of these views are quite right, in his view. But well, again, I don't want to affix exactly what his beliefs are, having only been into the beginning of this book so far. We're only talking about the introduction today. Let's just say it sure seems like he does fall under one of those views, and he's just going to argue for it. But a little farther down, he says, driven by a sense of providence and acute appreciation of the fallibility of humankind, they created a nation in which religion should not be singled out for special help or particular harm. Is that the nation that we have today? A nation in which religion should not be singled out for special help or particular harm?
Yeah.
He says the balance between the promise of the Declaration of Independence with its evocation of divine origins and destiny, and the practicalities of the Constitution with its checks on extremism remain perhaps the most brilliant American success. What are the checks on extremism in the Constitution, though, is the thing. It checks on the extremism of our leaders, but not of our people. And that's kind of the problem, is leftists today, they want checks on religion of the people, not on government.
Later on page 7, he says, Or no. Okay, never mind. You keep talking because that was the wrong one.
Okay, no worries.
Later on, he said something else that I wanted to bring up. I thought I'd found it, but I didn't.
No, it's all good. He continues a little further down, saying, it is not for priests or pastors or presidents or kings to compel belief, for to do so trespasses on each individual's God-given liberty of mind and heart. If the Lord himself chose not to force obedience from those he created, then who are we as men to try? Now, I couldn't agree with that sentence more. I do not believe that it's anybody's job to enforce obedience to God or to force the belief in God or anything of the like. That doesn't mean that law cannot coincide with religious law or religion or Christian tenets in any way. Those are two very different things. You don't have to believe in Christianity to not murder people. That's where that comes from. Go ahead.
Yeah, so later on, page 17, he
Holy
says...
shit, you're jumping way up. Go ahead.
Not to jump too far ahead, but I think it's just a particular quote that ties back to that.
Okay.
He says, if totalitarianism was the great problem of the 20th century, then extremism is, so far, the great problem of the 21st.
Interesting. How do you feel about that?
I think it's about right, but you do see, there's definitely been a rise of extremism.
What kind of extremism are we talking about here, though? Is he just talking about general extremism or religious extremism?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I mean, I feel like politically and religiously there's been more extremism.
Yeah.
From certain religions.
I could grant that, because there's definitely some people on the Christian religious right side that I don't fully agree with, or in fact vehemently disagree with on certain points.
But if you're just going to paint an entire group of people out by their extremists, it doesn't mean religion is all bad or anything.
One thing that I think leftists get wrong a lot about this country is this has always been a country of extremists. And now that doesn't mean that we allow extremists to force their extremist views on people. That's two different things. But the founders were extremists. They were radicals. And that is, A, extremely important, and B, worth noting. A lot of people talk about, well, we've never had times like this. Like, in the 1960s, we had MLK assassinated, JFK assassinated, we had the Cold War, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, there have been times, and then during the Civil War, we have various assassinations and political attacks and things along those lines, both before the Civil War and then also during Reconstruction. Like, there has been not nonstop turmoil in the United States, but there is always been a certain level of turmoil, a certain level of extremism, and a certain level of violence, I guess, for lack of a better word. Maybe it's inherent to a somewhat free nation. We say all the time that, freedom is dangerous, and that's why most people around the world reject it. They're afraid of what comes with that kind of freedom, because you don't just get freedom for yourself. And this is the problem with every other country on earth. They all want freedom for themselves, but they don't trust their neighbor to have freedom. And that's the responsibility that comes with freedom, is it's not just for you. You have to trust other people with it too. So I don't know that I fully agree.
Mm-hmm.
Because extremism is such a broad,
Yeah.
it's such a broad thing. Do I think that leftist extremism is a significant problem right now? Yeah, I also think it was a significant problem 50 years ago and 100 years ago.
I think it would be better to say violent extremism is a problem, not just extremism.
Sure. There are, but people like this tend
But
to
it
that
says
all extremism is.
totalitarianism was the 19th century or 20th century, whatever, and then extremism. But were the Nazis not extremists in their views?
That's a good point. Of course they were. Well, let's come back to that and let's back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Where did you last read from?
Page 5, and then the second to last paragraph here, where I said, is it not for priests or pastors, presidents or kings to compel belief? For to do so trespasses on each individual's God-given liberty of mind and heart. If the Lord himself chose not to force obedience from those he created, then who are men?
Great minds think alike. I also had that highlighted. So then on page 6 of the first paragraph, I've got secularists reflexively point to the Jeffersonian wall of separation between church and state. So now we're getting to, as though the conversation should end there, many conservative Christians defend their forays into the political arena by citing the founders as though Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Franklin were cheerful Christian soldiers.
They kind of were.
What do you think about that? Yeah.
I agree with him on the first part because, like I said, the separation of church and state thing, while it might have been a firm belief of Jefferson's, and I'm not convinced by that, it certainly is how he governed, though. But it wasn't extrapolated to the rest of the government. It was something. It was a personal choice that he made. But to believe that Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Franklin weren't cheerful Christian soldiers, they were. They were all very strong believers themselves, and also very strong believers that Americans needed to believe, needed to have faith, and needed to follow the tenets of Christianity. Now, that didn't equate to a willingness to force, because they knew there was no legitimacy in force. But that doesn't mean they didn't firmly believe that every last American should be Christian. So I don't buy the second part of the sentence, is the short answer.
I think it goes back to something I've at least talked with you about. I'm not sure how much I've brought it up on the show, but just how I think it's more particularly on the left, but I think even people on the right seem to take a look back at our founding era and be like, oh, Franklin, he was a womanizer, and Adams, or not Adams, but Jefferson owned slaves, Washington owned slaves and had dentures made out of his slaves' teeth, and so they have like this disdain for them, and then, but it's, I don't know, it just brings me back to Matthew chapter 7. It's just like, can we really judge them for things they were taking practice in that may have been of the time and may be a sin, whatever it is, because of what they did? I think I can forgive them for anything they did, in my opinion.
Well, and a lot of it, is you really can't take any of that, even at face value. You can't even take it as, okay, well, it's probably not true, but there's probably some truth to it, because that is a intentional, coordinated effort to discredit the founders by any means necessary. And the fact is, we can't judge others by the morals that we live in today. And most of those things are drastically taken out of context, out of well, just all context removed from it to make it look as bad as possible, even ignoring the morality of today, it still looks bad when in reality, when we actually see it, it's just not the case. The founders were upstanding people. Were they perfect people? By no means. Were they slightly philanderous, partied a little too hard, some of them? Were not always the most moral and upright in their own personal lives? Sure, but who is? There's nobody today that is either. Keep in mind, George Washington was a soldier. He saw god-awful things the same way soldiers today see. So what if he smoked some fucking weed? Which, I'm not sure that he actually smoked weed, but apparently he grew hemp, which, by the way, was legal at the time. Like,
Yeah, I
that
looked
didn't
it up.
become illegal till way later.
Just to take a side note, I looked that up once, and it said that they only grew hemp for the fibers, and they didn't grow it with THC. They grew CBD variants.
Okay, so they drank
only. So if they would have smoked it, it wouldn't have, been. They still could have been smoking it for the CBD. I mean,
so they drank too much. So, anybody that says, some of the people that have done the greatest things are terrible in their own lives. But what somebody does in their personal life does not affect how they are to other people necessarily. It can, but unless it does, it's irrelevant.
All right, I'm moving on to page 7. The second paragraph. First full paragraph of the page. So, in one of the last letters of his life, written, his doctor said, with all the striking characteristics of his vigorous and unfaded intellect, Jefferson spoke of America's hard-won freedom from monarchs who used church and state to reign over others, acting as though only kings could draw strength and standing from God. All eyes are opened or opening to the rights of man, he wrote on Saturday, June 24th, 1826. The general spread of the light of science has already laid open to every view the palpable truth that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a favored few booted and spurred, ready to ride them legitimately by the grace of God.
Funny, I had that quote highlighted too.
So yeah,
Jefferson,
here he does kind of paint Jefferson as like agnostic.
And agnostic is probably a good way to put it. Jefferson really was, he firmly believed that that the teachings in the Bible have been bastardized. And this is something that I questioned a lot when I was questioning religion myself, was, that God didn't actually write the Bible. Humans did. And so how much of it is accurate translation, let alone how much of it has been added over the years? It's 7,000 years old. We don't know how many hands it's been through. We don't know who's done and added what. We know a couple of the people that have, like King James, right? And we know that he omitted things he didn't like. He added other things or altered translations that he wanted to. And I think that is what was forefront of mind for Jefferson, which is why he was really looking to kind of get past what could be added solely to what is the actual Word of God, I think. And I think that the only frame in which he knew to do that through was the Enlightenment, was a scientific mindset. And so that's kind of what he did. And maybe rightly or wrongly, but at least to somebody like me, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know that I fully agree with it, but I understand it.
You know what the Dead Sea Scrolls are?
Mm-hmm. I've seen them.
Yeah. The book of Isaiah that was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls is a direct translation to Bibles now.
Is it?
Yeah.
To what kind of Bible? The New International?
Yeah. You know, nothing's been added or taken away, and it's.
I didn't see. Was this one that Dad got me? A King James or a New International? I hope it's not a King James. Damn it, New King James.
I think it just kind of shows the. What would you call it? I want to say like the progression of humanity, because we're talking 250 years ago. So this was a group of humans that was living, 1,776 years since Christ was born. So we're still figuring it out.
Died, right?
Well, no.
Is it from his? I thought we
The
counted
era
from his
get-
death. Anyway,
Era gets separated from when he's born. Yeah. So, and now we're 2,026 years since Christ was born. And so we figured out a lot more stuff. We found the Dead Sea Scrolls,
that's true.
that's given us a lot of insight. Supposedly, I follow this page on X that they say they found Noah's Ark and they're beginning at excavating it. So we'll see if it actually is.
Yeah, I had read about that a long time ago. I haven't heard anything about it since. I'll have you show me that page later. But I haven't put any thought into it since I heard about it. Is this the people that claim it's up on a mountain in the ice somewhere?
I don't think it's in the ice somewhere. I can't remember where they say it's at.
Okay. Well, there's two, I think. There's one that's like on a hillside in Turkey, I think. Or a mountain, whatever, but it's in a like desert area, whereas this other one is closer to Iran, I want to believe, and way up on a mountain, like frozen in the ice. And there's even video of them going into it and stuff, but it's like it was only Chinese explorers and stuff, and it's like I just can't trust this. Like I don't know. There just wasn't enough there yet,
Yeah, this says it's Dur-Rupinar site in Turkey.
Yeah, okay. So that's the
Mount Ararat.
That's the one where they think they have the what's left of the bottom of the boat, basically. Yeah.
But they are quoting the Quran, so that's interesting. But yeah, there's just been time to study and refine scripture and what everything means, and we still have it today. And I believe that's why the founding fathers gave us this freedom of religion, was because that way we didn't get nailed down as Catholics or Quakers and things like that,
Yeah, that's a good point. Because they believed in the Christian God, but they didn't all agree on exactly how to practice that belief. Focusing on Jefferson for a minute, he said, "No one sees with greater pleasure than myself the progress of reason in its advances toward Christianity." And I think that quote, which, by the way, I don't believe came from this, unless it was quoted further on and I missed it. But I think that quote really summarizes his view on Christianity. No one sees with greater pleasure than myself the progress of reason in its advances toward Christianity. And anyone that's looking with an honest lens, they're not coming at it from, I don't believe in God, therefore I'm going to find a way to disprove it. And they're not coming from it at a I believe in God, therefore I need to find a way to disprove science or evolution or whatever it is. It's impossible to follow the Enlightenment, follow the scientific advances that we have, let alone, I mean, we just heard again, every astronaut that has ever been to space, but we just heard it from these last astronauts that have been to space. One of them said, I'm not even religious, but I found it incredibly hard up there watching that eclipse from the space capsule not to believe that this was a creation. And the more we learn, the more it confirms rather than denies what we believe about this. And there's all kinds of crazy people that go off on, different things that may have some relevance, maybe doesn't, on both sides, right? There's the Christian scientists that go into some weird places. There's atheists that are trying to disprove it, that go off into some weird places. But generally speaking, everything proves itself. The more that I learn, the more that I see, the more it seems to prove that not only is there intelligent design, because there's just, I mean, the astronomical probabilities otherwise is incalculable. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think after this book, what's going to be next is I have a book back here, which this is probably what we're going to be doing, is taking these books off my shelf and actually cracking them open. But the big red book is a biography of every American president, and I may do George Washington's biography next, because the story of George Washington, I think, just has God's hands written all over it. It just, if you don't know it, I don't even want to try to shortly recap it, because I will go down a completely different road. We're trying to review this book, but that's probably what we'll do next. So I think it was interesting that he then starts the next paragraph, the second full paragraph of page 7, with, "For the founding fathers, God's grace was universal."
Yeah, it is an interesting declaration to make after what he said so far.
Did you have anything else on page 7?
Let me see. I highlighted to Jefferson, the creator invested the individual with rights no human power should ever take away. That is, of course, the basis of fundamental rights. That is what makes the United States the United States. And so that's probably Jefferson's greatest single contribution to this country, which is probably the only reason I highlighted it. But then I also highlighted, what separated us from the old world was the idea that books, education, and the liberty to think and worship as we wished would create virtuous citizens who cherished and defended reason, faith, and freedom. In our finest hours, we have been neither wholly religious nor wholly secular, but have drawn on both traditions. What exactly is the definition of secular? Worldly rather than spiritual, not relating to religion or to a religious body, non-religious. So atheist?
Yeah, kind of like atheists. I've heard secular people also be described as just people who
Neutral.
don't believe in any religion. They just believe in God. I believe Joe Rogan's kind of secular, not atheist.
So I might have assigned this wrong, but yeah, this other definition says neutral in regard to religion. Because atheist is not believing in God. But anyway, so I could believe that if secularist is just neutrality towards religion, I mean, in that case, I'm secularist. But so in our finest hours, we have been neither wholly religious nor wholly secular, but have drawn on both traditions. I could buy that. And I could accept that, I think, if that is the case. I don't believe that there should be any dominant religion in the United States by anything other than choice, obviously. And I don't believe that. Well, I don't want to say that. So let's just stick with. I don't believe there needs to be any sort of dominant or enforced religion in the United States.
Mm-hmm. But are we allowed to enforce things that come from the Bible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question
But
about that.
We
Because there's
just don't
still
say, hey, everyone here has to be Christian.
there's still moral
Everyone
right
here
and
has
wrong.
to be Muslim. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and there's still moral right and wrong. And when we say that this is a Christian nation, what we mean is it is a nation built on Christian morals and values. It doesn't mean you have to be a Christian, but you do have to adhere to those morals and values. You don't have to practice the customs, but you do have to adhere to the morals and values.
Yeah.
That is where we draw them from.
What's so wrong with that? I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, like,
right or
let's
wrong.
just have a morally correct society.
Right or wrong, that's what it is. So if you believe it's wrong, fine, go find somewhere else. And I don't say that out of anger, but this is what we do here. This is what we created here. And this is what the majority of us still want to be a part of here. And it's not infringing on somebody else's rights to enforce those things.
I've got quite a few on page 8. So do you have anything on page 8?
I've got a couple underlines. The first one is many of the founders were influenced by deism, an Enlightenment vision of religion, which held that there was a single creator, God.
Yeah, I had that highlighted too.
And then he says, some deists, including Jefferson and Franklin, believed that this God worked in the world through providence. For them, Jesus of Nazareth was a great moral teacher, even the greatest in all history, but he was not the Son of God, and the Holy Trinity was seen as an invention of the corrupt church, more interested in temporal power than in true religion. See, so right there, and the reason I highlighted that right there is he just implied that that was a belief of Jefferson and Franklin. That was only a belief of Jefferson's. Franklin did not deny it, but he didn't take a side in it. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But I think we should talk about Jefferson's view specifically now at this point before we continue.
All right.
What else did you have highlighted on page 8? Because, I mean, that's where he's starting to go anyway. So
I had the first part of that paragraph that you read from.
Go ahead and
as well as that entire quote that you had too.
So go ahead and read.
He said the founders were politicians and philosophers, sages and warriors, churchmen and doubters. They knew history and literature, politics and philosophy, theology and business, statecraft and soldiering. And I do think that is a very good description of our founding fathers as a whole. You can take of all of them. We're kind of talking about big names right now, but as a whole, I think it's a pretty good,
Yeah, absolutely.
Men from every walk of life, really.
No, I agree completely. So do you want me to do the Jefferson thing here to bring this in? Seems like the most apt place for it.
Yeah, because that's when,
All right.
If you have anything more to say about page 8, then yeah, we can.
Not particular. I mean, that's what the rest of this is going to be, I think. So
yeah,
allow me to
let's hit it.
To set the mood. Oh. Stand by. It's coming. Sorry, it's one of those things where there was like 90 in one video, so I had to like click the right spot. There we go.
Stay tuned for that transition.
The room at Monticello was warm and still on the morning of the 4th. Light came through the tall windows in long, slow bars across the floorboards. Jefferson lay in the bed that he had designed himself. His body thin now, the famous red hair gone, white and sparse. His breathing was shallow, each inhale a small labor. Every few minutes he would stir and ask the same thing in a voice barely above a whisper. Is it the 4th yet? They told him yes. It had been the 4th now for hours. The 50th anniversary of the Declaration. He seemed satisfied each time, then drifted again. Outside, the Virginia hills rolled green and peaceful under a clear sky. The same hills he had measured and planted and walked for decades. He spoke once more of John Adams, calling him the old man with something like affection. No one in the room had a heart to tell him that Adams himself had already slipped away that very same morning, hundreds of miles north. The two old revolutionaries were finishing almost in step. There were no grand speeches, no crowds at the gate, just family, a few servants, the familiar creak of the house that he loved. Books stood on the shelves that he had built. A half-finished letter lay on the table. The great mind that had written liberty into existence was gently letting go. Toward the end, the fever took him deeper. He murmured about gardens, about clocks, about the rights of man. Then, late in the afternoon, he grew quiet. The light outside softened into evening. Monticello's lamps were lit, as they always were. But one of the greatest of them had gone out. He died on the exact day that he helped create. No flourish, no drama, just a man leaving the world he had worked so hard to set free. Boy, that music couldn't have crescendoed at a more perfect time.
At Jefferson's funeral, Reverend Frederick Hatch, whom Jefferson knew and liked, was called on to read an episcopal burial office. The day was wet and planks were placed over the grave to hold the casket. I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. Hatch said, He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believe in me shall never die. And so Jefferson, no conventional Christian, took his leave in the most Christian of ceremonies, in the manner dictated by the faith of his fathers.
I find some real poetic justice in him dying on the 50th anniversary of the 4th of July.
Yeah. And what's interesting is only hours later, Adams died. And so George Washington was our first president. Adams was our second president. Jefferson was our third president. George Washington was the first president to ever die. Also the first president. Jefferson was the second president to ever die, and he is the third president, died on July 4th, 1826. Adams, our second president, is the third president to ever die, only hours after Jefferson died, and they were best friends, weren't they? Not best friends, they were pretty good friends, right?
I literally just read where it said Adams died first. So,
Adams died first?
Yeah. Which would put it 1, 2, 3. I mean,
Hmm.
unless that was incorrect, but what you sent me said that Adams died first, because it said that Jefferson called out, and it said he spoke once more of Adams, calling him the old man with something like affection. No one in the room had the heart to tell him that Adams had already slipped away that same morning. So he died in the morning, Jefferson in the evening. According to that. Anywho. So the core of Jefferson wrote his own Bible. And he did that because he believed that humans had really bastardized the Word of God, particularly in the New Testament, over the, I don't know what he thought about the Old Testament, but particularly in the New Testament, he believed that it had been bastardized. I don't think he believed that Jesus was God or God's son. He believed he was like Muhammad, essentially, the first. He believed he was the first. What do you call it? Somebody that God speaks through.
Prophet?
Yeah, he believed basically that Jesus was a prophet, and that taught the word of God, but that the stuff about miracles was nonsense. And in particular, he took great exception to the Holy Spirit and to the Trinity in particular. He didn't deny the Holy Spirit itself, but he denied it being its own entity, saying this. So I read the beginning of this quote earlier. Now I'm going to read the whole quote. He said, "No one sees with greater pleasure than myself the progress of reason and its advances toward Christianity. When we shall have done away with the incomprehensible jargon of the Trinitarian arithmetic, that 3 are 1 and that 1 is 3, when we shall have knocked down the artificial scaffolding reared to mask from view the simple structure of Jesus, we shall then be truly and worthily his disciples. Sorry, I wrote that in a haste, so I couldn't hardly read it. But he called the Trinity hocus pocus, and he called it a hocus pocus phantom of God. And like Cerebrus, he said to Franklin, actually, which is a Greek mythological creature with 3 heads. No idea what this says. He believed it was something regarding mistranslation. I mean, that's what he put it down to, was mistranslation and kind of grafting by the powerful. What he believed was that the idea of the Trinity and the idea of the miracles, the Holy Spirit, the 3 in 1, 1 is 3 thing, he believed that by adding a kind of mystical realm to the story of Jesus and to the story of God, it gave clerics of the time, and it gave people like King James the ability to kind of gatekeep Christianity, because they were adding mystery that they could explain to you what it meant, but there was no way for you to fully understand, basically, is the way that he saw it. And so he thought it was nonsense, and that's why he rewrote the Bible, particularly the New Testament, removing any mention of miracles, removing the Trinity, which actually, I didn't know this, the Trinity is not mentioned in the Bible at all. So he didn't remove it, it just wasn't there. The Holy Spirit is mentioned a time or two, but more in connection to God's presence rather than a separate entity. It's never specifically outlined in the Bible as a separate entity. Apparently. I'm not,
Well, I mean, it says the Spirit of God was basically running through the Garden of Eden, or over the face of the earth. In Genesis, it says, like, God created the earth, and the earth was formless, and God's Spirit was roaming over the earth. Things like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, but that, I mean, you could interpret that several ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can interpret the Holy Spirit as God's presence among all of us, right? He's present and not present at the same time amongst all of us.
And also, when they built the Ark of the Covenant, there's 2 cherubim on top. In between there was where it was said God's Spirit was dwelling on earth.
That's right. I remember that. Now, Franklin didn't believe that. Franklin he didn't deny Jefferson's belief, but to him, and as I told you, this is more where I align, it didn't really matter in the end. Yes, it could be, bastardized text meant by totalitarians to rule over people, or it could be less nefarious mistranslations and just poor understanding over the years. But to him, it didn't really matter. It just, the core teachings were still the core teachings with or without those. And we'll have the answers, one day when we meet God. As far as trying to determine now what is real and what isn't and all that, it doesn't drastically change what you're supposed to do as a Christian. It doesn't drastically change. God's not going to fault you for falsely believing something that somebody 6,000 years ago put in the Bible, or vice versa, for not believing something you didn't know you were supposed to believe. He's going to care that you were a good person. And ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to. I think that people that don't... I think people that don't reject God but don't necessarily directly accept him into his heart, but are still good people. They still live by the tenets of the Bible, even if they don't realize they're doing it. To me, the God of the Bible that I read would give them the opportunity to accept God into their heart. They wouldn't just go to hell because they didn't believe in something they didn't know they were supposed to, Now, if you flat out reject God and even worse, accept the devil, then I guess you're screwed. But although not if you're on Earth, you can always repent as long as you're on Earth.
Mm-hmm. So I'm moving on to page 12, second paragraph.
Okay.
And he begins talking about Samuel Adams now. Samuel Adams, a fierce advocate of independence, was a Puritan who looked askance at other faiths, but knew that faith and political warfare were a deadly combination. Neither religion nor liberty, he said, can long subsist in the tumult of altercation and amidst the noise and violence of faction. Franklin was so supple in matters of religion that he drove a frustrated John Adams to write. The Catholics thought him almost a Catholic. The Church of England claimed him as one of them. The Presbyterians thought him half a Presbyterian. And the Friends believed him a wet Quaker.
A wet Quaker?
Yep.
Alrighty then.
And you know what? I'm going to look that up while you say some things. What exactly
Excuse me.
a wet Quaker was.
I mean, it sounds to me like he's complaining that he's too wishy-washy. But
yeah, that's what I'm...
To me, I don't think it matters. I think that very similar to a Supreme Court justice today, where the left likes them because they think they're on their side. The right likes the same one.
A wet Quaker just means he drank alcohol.
Oh, okay.
So,
but if you take a Supreme Court justice today, and you have one that the left likes because they think he's on their side, but the right likes the same guy thinking he's on their side, that's a good Supreme Court justice, because he must be applying the rules pretty close to fairly if both sides agree most of the time. And I think that in that same light, if Jefferson is appealing to all these different sects for that reason, then he's probably onto something.
Mm-hmm. I think I want to take a second to like look at a modern example of this. So,
Okay.
do you like Glenn Beck? Like, do you, for the most part?
I don't have any particular issues with him. I think he's a little too nihilistic, I guess, is for lack of a better word. He takes things to the extreme a lot, but
yeah, and he's a Mormon.
correct.
Does that mean I discount any good takes he has or anything, any of his takes just because he's a Mormon on his politics,
I mean, I would.
Not really.
Yeah.
I don't really look at him, obviously he's a Mormon, it's a little different, but it's like, I'm not going to discount the man immediately.
I just don't. See, and this is the thing this is the problem I have with organized religion, and why, even though I was born Catholic, baptized Catholic, and grew up in the Catholic Church, I don't go to church enough, granted. But when I do go to church, I go to the Catholic Church because that's what I'm familiar with, but not because I still see myself as Catholic. I have plenty of problems with the Catholic Church, but I've had plenty of problems with other churches too. I went through a time where, like a lot of people, I went to a few different churches and tried different things, and none of them really fit either. I think that religion, and especially organized religion, is something that has been fairly bastardized today. At this particular moment in time, I think there's been plenty of times in history when it's been bastardized as well. I think that it kind of, comes and goes depending on how good we're doing as society. But I don't understand the once people like get on a team, then they want to fight all the other teams, which just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think that all these intricacies matter. I really don't. God is not going to let me into heaven and not you because I drank wine at church and you didn't. I know you guys drink wine, but some churches don't. He's not going to I'm not going to get a special gold star because I sang the hymns in Old Latin instead of in English. Like, all of that is just nonsense to me.
Particularly in the South, the difference between a lot of the churches is how they raise their hands during worship. Some of them put their hands directly out like this. Well, you can't really see it, like, hands out in front, palms up. Some of them put hands straight up like this. Some just kind of, maybe it's one or the other,
Maybe one.
I don't think I haven't had enough time to really delve into the real differences between, Baptist and Presbyterian and Lutheran, and I know there's a distinct difference between Catholicism and most of these other ones. What do you call that? The Protestants, the Catholics and the Protestants are what the real divide is,
Apparently, yeah.
So I haven't had much time to investigate that, but it's like, at the same time, it's like I brought up Glenn Beck, Michael Knowles is another prominent Christian figure in politics that I like to listen to, and he's a Catholic. I don't discount his political beliefs because of him being a Catholic. And when he starts talking about religion, I'm kind of like, but it's not, at the end of the day, that's still a brother in Christ.
I mean, you should.
He's still doing the best he can. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's silly, and I think that the idea that anybody on Earth today knows exactly what God wants is lying and incorrect. And maybe they're not, but there's no way for me to know that. So what difference does it make? I'm going to follow the best that I have, which is the Bible, the Word of God, to the best of my ability, and that's all I can do. anything beyond that is just nonsense, in my opinion. And that's why, while I don't necessarily exactly agree, I'm not sure I'm convinced on the Trinity thing and all of that with Jefferson. I am still, I think, most like him, or probably more like Benjamin Franklin in the sense that it just doesn't matter. It might be, it might not be. We'll find out one day. But for now, what matters is that I'm adhering to the principles that are laid out, and those principles we all agree on. There are some that people add and go above and beyond with, like Quakers being dry and all of that, but if they're not there, then, that's a personal choice, not a prescription of God.
Mm-hmm. So on page 13, he begins talking about John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, and then tells a story about Abraham Lincoln. So that's about halfway through this second paragraph on page 13.
Mm-hmm.
When Lincoln was running for the House of Representatives from Illinois, he was charged with being a scoffer at religion, wrote the historian William J. Wolfe, because he belonged to no church. During the campaign, Lincoln attended a sermon delivered by his opponent in the race, Reverend Peter Cartwright, a Methodist evangelicist. At a dramatic moment in his performance, Cartwright said, "All who do not wish to go to hell will stand." Only Lincoln kept his seat. "May I inquire of you, Mr. Lincoln, where you are going?" the minister asked, glowering. "I am going to Congress," was the dry reply.
That's funny.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one to include. I don't really have anything else there unless you had any more comments on that, but then he begins talking about George Washington on the next page after all men need the gods. So there's a great picture here we'll talk about in a little bit, but I'll show it.
George Washington
All right,
at
everyone
Federal
had a
Hall.
look at it. You can pause. So did you have anything here about in George Washington's part?
I'm looking to see, because I've got a few things, but I'm not sure if anything that particularly needs to be brought up at this moment.
So I guess I'll talk about the picture if you want to look through it for a second.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Under the picture, it says George Washington at Federal Hall, New York City, April 30th, 1789. Improvised, "So help me God," at the conclusion of the first presidential oath, and kissed the Bible. I should have had that pulled up. That could have read that. You think that'll be in the book with all the declaration and everything?
It's entirely possible.
It said it was at the ending of the first presidential oath. So we'll see.
So the only thing really that I did highlight that I think is worth bringing up here is twofold. So the first is human beings are what scholars refer to as homo religious. We are by nature inclined to look outside ourselves and beyond time and space to a divine power, or as in antiquity, powers, that creates, directs, and judges the world and our individual lives. All men, said Homer, need the gods. Do you agree with that?
Yes, in a sense. Obviously not the gods, but I believe every human needs God.
Did the Romans not have access to the Bible?
The Romans, Maybe not, because I don't know how the Jewish, how who they let have access to read their religious texts and stuff. I can't remember how that worked. If you had to be Jewish to read, and most people couldn't read back then,
That's true.
so most of them would just had to have heard it.
Because you can't help but wonder, do we make more of the Roman gods than the Romans did, for example? Are these more like spirit animals? Are they more like mascots that they refer to? Not that they actually believe them to be gods,
There was a part here about
Grok says, yeah, sorta, but not in the form of a single compiled Bible as we know it today. Access evolved over time. Go ahead.
there's a part about FDR. It says the only public statement FDR made on D-Day 1944 was to read a prayer he had written drawing on the 1928 Episcopal Book of Common Prayer. Dwight Eisenhower opened cabinet meetings with prayers.
Mm-hmm. And the point is?
Do you think FDR was fairly religious?
I think FDR was a bastard. I don't know.
Let's see.
I don't know. Do I think that Nancy Pelosi is religious? I think that they play a part. And I find it hard to believe that they're truly convinced by these things based on their actions as people. It seems to me that the core belief, the big secret belief of these secret groups like the Skull and Bones or the Masons is just in selfishness. It's just in, I am God, and there is nothing beyond this earth, so therefore it does not matter what I do on earth. And if that's what you believe, then you can't believe in God.
Yeah.
And when I look at somebody like FDR, he did a lot of terrible things. And he did a lot of things that he knew were terrible. And find a hard time believing that somebody that truly believes in God could do that. At the same time, we see radical leftists today that do a lot of terrible things and are fully convinced they are doing the right thing. Of course, they don't do it in God's name. Some of them do, I guess. But I mean, I got that video of that woman pastor saying that we need to rewrite we need to write a third testament. And we need to take out the things she doesn't like in the Bible. She apparently believes in God, just, the God that she wants to believe in, not the God that is. So I don't know. The only other thing I had highlighted, which is on page 15, not 14, was Ronald Reagan was not afraid to say that he saw the world as a struggle between light and dark, calling the Soviet Empire the focus of evil in the modern world. And after launching strikes against Libya in retaliation for a terrorist bombing, declaring, "We have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again. Our finest hours, the Revolutionary War, abolition, the expansion of rights of women, fights against terror and tyranny, the battle against Jim Crow, can partly be traced to religious..." Hold on, did I go to the right page? Yes, okay. Can partly be traced to religious ideas about liberty, justice, and charity. Yet theology and scripture have always been used to justify our worst hours, from enslaving black people to persecuting Native Americans to treating women as a second-class citizen.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that part, because For some reason, must have forgot to underline that because I definitely want to talk about that.
I mean, that goes basically to exactly what what I just said based on what you asked me.
Yep. Was the Bible used to justify slavery?
Yeah, by the king.
Was the Bible used to abolish slavery?
Yes.
All right. So what's it matter?
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it really only highlights the fallibility of man, I guess, more than anything. The Bible really only, what would you say, endorses slavery in the Old Testament. By the New Testament, it doesn't really endorse slavery anymore. Well, and let's say the Bible does. Just for a second, let's live in this fake world where the Bible fully endorses slavery. Okay? Does that mean that the Western slave trade was in fact okay or congruent with biblical text, with Christianity, with acceptance with God? Of course not. Because even if it did accept the premise of slavery, which maybe you could say the premise of indentured servitude, that doesn't accept capturing people. It doesn't accept the horrid conditions that many lived in. It doesn't accept the brutal beatings that some of them were subject to. It doesn't accept all of those other things that we know are blatantly, I was going to say unconstitutional, but anti-religious, let's just say, or anti-Christian. So even if you were to accept the slavery part in and of itself, that doesn't mean the practices that actually occurred were justified by it. And that's one of the things that, I always refer back to that first draft of the Declaration that Jefferson wrote. That's one of the things he called out the king for, was calling himself a Christian king while subjecting people to the evils of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a worthy point, but I think your point is valid too. It was used on both sides, so.
And in the end,
again, we're just men trying to implement God's word. We're not gods trying to implement it.
Mm-hmm. In the end, the right side won.
That's true.
At least so far as we can tell.
For now, yeah.
So I didn't have anything else highlighted until that quote that I read from earlier on page 17. So if you had anything between there, let me know, or else I'm just probably going to start reading from the paragraph after that quote from earlier.
No, go ahead.
So the quote from earlier, just in case we've forgotten, but it was, if totalitarianism was the great problem of the 20th century, then extremism is, so far, the great problem of the 21st. It need not be this way. Extremism is a powerful alliance of fear and certitude. Complexity and humility are its natural foes. Faith and life are essentially mysterious, for neither God nor nature is easily explained or understood. Crusades are for the weak, literalism for the insecure. Believers should heed St. Paul, who conceded the limits of the human endeavor on this side of paradise. Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and how unscrutable are his ways.
Are we going to finish the paragraph?
I can, if you wanted me to. I mean, I don't know.
Might as well.
And then alluded to as Isaiah, for who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor? The secular can find a similarly instructive text in a remark of Hamlet's. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
I'm not sure exactly what he's getting at here. Trying to read a little farther to jog my memory, but I'm not sure I got it the first time around. Are you? That was the view of many of the founding fathers. I hate polemical politics and polemical divinity, said John Adams. My religion is founded on the love of God and my neighbor, on the hope of pardon for my offenses, upon continuation upon the duty as well as the necessity of enduring with patience the inevitable evils of life, in the duty of doing no wrong, but all the good that I can, to the creation of which I am but an infinitesimal part. Well, if that's all he's saying, then okay, I agree. I mean, it's pretty clear that what he's laying out here in the introduction is that the founders were much more adhering to, or much more concerned with the adherence to the principles of the Bible, of the Christian faith, than they were the exact flavor of that faith, than they were the exact practices and I guess added beliefs, if you wanted to put it that way, of the various religions. And I agree with that completely. I agree that what they put into the government was as neutral Christianity as possible. It was the lessons, not the stories. It was the principles that mattered, not the customs or the practices or the rituals. That was the word I was looking for. I agree with that completely, but I'm not sure that I'm going to agree with what his ultimate conclusion is, which is that religion has no place in government, essentially. Beyond that, but again, that's jumping ahead a little bit.
The next thing I have is on page 19, second paragraph.
Okay.
Conservatives are not alone in attempting to appropriate the founding for their own ends. Many Americans, especially secular ones, tend to stake everything on Jefferson's wall between church and state. The wall metaphor originated with the Anglican divine Richard Hooker, was used by the dissenter Roger Williams, the Scottish intellectual James Burr, and by Jefferson, and gained its current weight when in 1947 Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black quoted Jefferson's phrase.
That's funny, because then I highlighted the wall Jefferson referred to is designed to divide the church from the state, not religion from politics. And that is the mistake that many leftists make. Now, again, not only does the wall not exist in any of our law, I do agree that the fundamental principle is there as far as he just laid out, that the wall is designed to divide church from state, not religion from politics. But well, I don't know. I think I guess I agree with it exactly as is. The concern of the founders was twofold. It was not forcing a religion on people, but forcing the principles of Christianity. Sure, that was the nature of the government that we set up. And it's not that we couldn't change that, but I believe 250 years later, it's every bit as relevant today to maintain they're still the best principles and morals that we've discovered thus far. And And unless God comes back to Earth and tells us a better way, then
Exactly.
I don't see why we'd change. But then they were also concerned greatly about the church itself. In part because of their concerns about organized religion in general, but then also in part because of their concerns about the church was a powerful entity at the time. And in a time when there was very little in the way of local and state government oversight, the church played a major role in the politics of day-to-day life. Not only did we only have a federal government as the colonies, the British government, the crown, it was also an ocean away at a time when we only had wood fucking boats. So things happened very slowly as far as that was concerned. Here in the colonies, the church was the head of politics in any town because that's where everybody met. The reverend was seen as the highest as far as godliness in the town, so why wouldn't he essentially lead the town? And that opens the door for corruption, but it also opens the door just for the fallibility of man. The people have a right to have a say in their government, as the founding fathers obviously laid out, and so they didn't want the influence of any particular church to weigh in on that. So
way over the whole country.
And I think that is intentionally, I guess the point is, I think that is intentionally manipulated today to imply a separation of religion when in fact it's a separation of the establishment of the church.
It's just a simple misunderstanding
of specific religions, but
it's just they think for some reason that separation of church and state means like a person basically can't talk about their faith in Christianity while being a senator or the president or a Supreme Court justice. It just means that, in my opinion, the way I see it, it just means that like we cannot have a theocracy where it says Catholicism is, even just Christianity is the religion of America. Everyone must practice it. Everyone must go to church on Sunday. Everyone must, observe the Sabbath, things like that. That's what it's meaning.
I agree.
And if you don't have anything else on that, it starts moving on to really talking about Benjamin Franklin.
All right, I guess we can go to Benjamin Franklin.
Starting on page 20, it has a picture here.
What an ugly fuck.
This guy. Under the picture, it says, to Benjamin Franklin, history taught that public religion was ultimately good for society. The concept of public religion includes a spirit of charity to others, a generous moral disposition, and rituals acknowledging a dependence on divine providence. I agree with that. And then moving on to page 21.
I got no disagreement.
Morality. So this is, I believe, a direct quote from Franklin. Morality, by decanting and making continual observations on causes of the rise or fall of any man's character, fortune, power, etc., mentioned in history, will demonstrate the advantages of temperance, order, frugality, industry, perseverance, etc., etc. History will always afford frequent opportunities of showing the necessity of a public religion from its usefulness to the public, the advantages of religious character among private persons, the mischiefs of superstition, etc., and the excellency of the Christian religion above all others, ancient or modern.
An excellent quote, and I agree. And he's basically saying what I said just a minute ago, which is until or unless something better comes along, we have undeniable proof at this point that the tenets of Christianity are by far the best way to live, more or less. I mean, that's oversimplifying maybe, but essentially what he's saying. What I found interesting, though, is he goes on to say, despite Franklin's generous words about Christianity, his idea of an American public religion was a word I don't know how to pronounce.
Which word was it? Sorry.
Ecumenical? All right.
Ecumenical.
Do you know what it means?
Ecumenical. Of, religious, like spiritual.
Of worldwide scope or applicability, universal, of or relating to worldwide Christian church. Got it. Not sectarian. Writing to Yale president Ezra Stiles on Tuesday, March 9, 1790, 14 years after the Declaration and just before his own death, the aged Franklin described his own faith, one he shared with many of the founders, with clarity and wit. I believe in one God, creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we can render to him is doing good to his other children, that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life, respecting its conduct in this. These I take to be the fundamental principles of all sound religion, and I regard them as you do in whatever sect I meet with them. As to Jesus of Nazareth, I think the system of the morals in his religion as he left them to us, the best the world has ever saw, or is likely to see. But I apprehend it as received various corrupting changes, and I have some doubts to his divinity. Though it is in question, I do not dogmatize upon, having never studied it, and think it needless to busy myself with it now, when I expect soon an opportunity of knowing the truth with less trouble.
Yep. That basically explains what you were saying, Franklin just wasn't exactly someone to debate religion.
Basically.
That's what basically he's saying. I don't dogmatize. It means I don't, worry about squandering or, quibbling or whatever word you want to put in there over this topic.
Well, and more or less, who am I to say which is right and which is wrong? I don't know any better than you do.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I don't have anything till 24.
I will point out that Meacham at this point says the nation's public religion then holds that there is a God, the one Jefferson called the Creator and nature's God in the Declaration of Independence. The God of public religion made all human beings in his image and endowed them, as Jefferson wrote, with sacred rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What the God of public religion has given, no king, no president, no government can abridge. Hence, the sanctity of human rights in America. The God of public religion is interested in the affairs of the world. The God of public religion may be seen as capable of rewarding or punishing individuals or the nation either here and now or later beyond time. And the God of public religion is sometimes spoken of as a God bound to the American nation in Jefferson's world as Israel of old. Generally speaking,
Yeah, I do think.
Go ahead.
I do think that's interesting. And the God of public religion is sometimes spoken of as a God bound to the American nation, in Jefferson's words, as Israel of old. Because that's a thought I've had well before I've read this book or anything. It's that God explicitly gave Israel to the Jews for them to inhabit. He gave it to Abraham,
Right.
And so the seed of Abraham may inhabit it. But then after Jesus came and he died, it separated time, really. And then it became not that only Jews are chosen by God. It says in Galatians, there is no Greek nor Jew, nor man nor woman, blah, blah, blah. And we are all one in Jesus Christ. And it also says in the Bible, I'm not exactly sure of the exact scripture, but that those who are in Jesus Christ are the seed of Abraham. So we became the inheritors, and those who believe in Jesus, the Christians, became the inheritors of Israel technically. But I believe that God has given America to us, and this is the new Israel, and God has been with us.
Interesting. I certainly believe that God has had a hand in this nation. Is it a nation that he specifically picked? I don't know. I think that if I had to narrow down a reason, I think it's because the people of this nation, since its founding, overwhelmingly, because again, there's always exceptions, but have tried to make it a nation which relies on the principles that God set out for us. And that is something no other nation has ever done. It tries to do best by the people, not just that live here, but of this world. And I mean, if you had to pick a nation in this world to watch over, what other nation would you pick?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there is one. The mindset in America is so unique to the rest of the world. It's truly astounding. This belief that we have as Americans that we have an obligation, of course, to ourselves and to our family, but to our neighbors, to our countrymen, and then beyond that to everybody else also. That doesn't exist anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. And I have a book up here called The Creation of the American Republic. And it has a quote in it from John Adams where he was talking about how it wasn't from John Adams. I'm thinking of a different quote, but I think it was a guy from France. He was a Frenchman, was talking about how the American political system is something that is unlike anything the world has ever seen. The way Americans conduct politics, I think this was around 1780s, 1790s is when this guy wrote this.
Okay.
The way the Americans conduct politics is something completely unique and unseen to the world.
Yeah. He goes on, without reading further into this page, he goes on to distinguish between public God, as we heard him talk about there, and private God. And basically that the founders were intentionally laying out God in a public life sense, in a government sense, as one unifying Christian God, but they wouldn't be divisive and they wouldn't interfere with people's private means of practicing their faith. The problem I have with that theory, I believe he's correct, but I believe that he saw it much more narrowly than leftists see it today. And again, I'm not trying to ascribe Meacham as a leftist at this point. I'm just saying that is often taken to believe by leftists today. Well, that includes Hinduism, and that includes the Quran, and that includes, or Islam, that includes Satanism, that includes, everybody has a god, or at least all these different religions have a god. But that's not true. Hinduism, Islamism, for example, they don't follow the same Christian tenets. And so, while yes, they are free to practice their religion, they're still living in a Christian nation. Much the same as if you went to a Muslim nation, you wouldn't expect them to change all of their laws to suit you. You would expect that they don't interfere with the way you practice your faith, but you would still adhere to the laws of the country because it is an Islamist country. It's the same thing here. This is a Christian country, and we do have customs, traditions, and laws that are consistent with that. And while I don't mind somebody being here, being a Muslim or being an Islam, studying Islam or practicing it, that's as long as you are adhering to Christian rules here. You don't have to pray to my God, but you do have to follow the rules that we have.
So we've still got quite a few pages till we're through the introduction. I'd want to try and power through a little bit of this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm going to page 24, first full paragraph. For
All right,
believers, God may guide... What?
Go ahead and read real quick. I got to grab something real fast. Right back.
Okay. For believers, God may guide history, but men remain its makers. The connection between public religion and private religion is therefore often close. As John T. Noonan Jr., the scholar and judge, wrote, nations do not worship, persons do. In a president's private faith inevitably informs his public life. The task of the citizen is to discern as clearly as possible the extent to which that president's private religious belief influences how he governs, and to speak out to vote accordingly if the intermingling jeez, that's a hard word, my guy.
Intermingling
of personal conviction in public affairs is found to be unsettling.
I mean, I find you unsettling, but...
I get it.
So wait, summarize it, since I missed it.
Do what?
I said summarize since I missed it.
He's basically saying that it's important to know a politician's public or private religion in order to vote accordingly. And I kind of agree with that.
Absolutely. How do you feel... I know you want to power through this, but I think this question's too important to pass up because of what you just said. How do you feel the founders would have felt about Ilhan Omar? About an Islamist gaining power in this country that very clearly does not adhere to our Christian tenets? Because on one hand...
I feel like they definitely would have disagreed with her, but I believe that if they thought this area, if it was done legitimately, if she was elected legitimately, I feel like they would just have their disagreements, They'd be like, well, I don't really agree with them being there, but if they want to be there, as long as they stay within the Constitution, they're not going and grabbing people's guns and stuff, then yeah. That's
the key. As long as they're staying within the Constitution, which she isn't, at least if we assume the fraud is true. But...
yeah. Did you hear about her? She used to be worth 30 million. Then she found out there was an accounting error. Actually, she's worth like 100,000.
Yeah.
So anyways,
we'll have to look into that one of these days. But the reason I think it's important is there is a section of the right, and it's one that we're dealing with currently. Some believe that it's what Project 2025, like the underlying thing behind it. I don't quite think so, but I do think that there is some level of that to it, which is basically that the founding fathers would have never allowed this because she very clearly is not in line with Christian tenets, does not follow them. She doesn't need to practice them, but she has to follow them because she is a senator or a House member, or she's a representative in this country?
House representative, yeah, I think.
And there are some that believe that alone is enough to force her out, basically, that we can just prevent her from being in government because she is Muslim rather than not. And I think that, I don't think that's true. I think that what you said is correct, that the founders would have seen it as your duty as an American to not vote for her because of that. But if you duly elect her, then you have to suffer that's part of the responsibility of freedom, is you need to make sure you know what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've allowed Americans in their understanding of their country and their responsibility to this country to slip so far is not an excuse for us to go outside of the Constitution to protect that. Even if the purpose is protecting it. And so, unless she were to go outside of the Constitution, only then can you do something. But basically, we have no choice but to use the systems available. And if she were to backdoor away into an Islamic rule, well, then that's what the Second Amendment's for. But we have to suffer the consequences of our own stupidity, too.
So continuing from that paragraph, he says, as in so many things, the wise American president can learn much from Lincoln, who once told some visiting ministers that he did not worry whether God was on his side or not, for I know that the Lord is always on the side of the right. It was Lincoln said, my constant anxiety and prayer that I and this nation should be on the Lord's side. And so I don't know if you'd heard that quote from Lincoln before. I definitely had. I always thought it was kind of a good one, you know. For I know that the Lord is always on the right side of the right, you know.
I had not heard that one before.
It kind of basically is saying that because then, you know, he continues to say, my constant anxiety and prayer that I in this nation should be on the Lord's side. He's basically saying that he's hoping he's close enough to God and is receiving enough wisdom from God that he's making the right decision. Because ultimately he doesn't know. There's no way any man can know if ending slavery was the correct decision or not. It's turned out to be a pretty good decision so far, but I mean, still, what do we know?
Well, and I think, the Founding Fathers agreed and I think knew that ending slavery was correct. The concern was when to end it, was how to end it.
How.
In order to both respect the rights of Black Americans and to protect the rest of us as well in the nation we were creating for everybody. Because if we didn't have that nation, then they had no hope of being free. And that's what a lot of the people that just call them all racist and stuff get wrong about people like Jefferson. Yeah, he had slaves. They were handed down to him, but he had slaves. And he fought every day of his life to free them. And a lot of people say, well, he could have freed him on his death. No, he couldn't. He owed debt. And whether he liked it or not, the law saw them as assets, not as people. And so no matter how much he disagreed with it, yes, he could have gone beyond the law. And maybe he should have. And maybe he regretted that he didn't. In just letting them go and telling the bank, sorry. You know, they ran away. There's nothing I can do. But then that also could have been worse for them, too. Because if the bank decided to hunt them down, they could have all ended up hung in the town square.
Yeah.
And the thing
so
is...
who's to say what the right decision is, you know?
Yeah, and the thing is, he knew that if he, one of the founders of this country, went outside the law, then that just threatened the very fabric of the legitimacy anyway. He was convinced that we would eventually end slavery. But what would that mean if nobody paid attention to what the law was anyway?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it led to a bloody civil war. So, I mean, page 26, we've got another picture for the picture guys, you know. That's George Washington.
The crayon eaters out there.
A man of generous religious spirit, Washington once said, we have abundant reason to rejoice that in this land the light of truth and reason has triumphed over the power of bigotry and superstition, and that every person may hear worship God according to the dictates of his conscience. Courtesy of bearwalls.com.
Interesting. Since you have a better version of this picture, I don't know if you can see mine, but mine's not the best. Is that a giant tit in the center of the photo?
A giant tit.
I gotta make
What?
it bigger because I can't see.
Which part are you
Damn it.
talking about?
So on mine, if you go directly to the center, then go down just a little bit and just a little bit to the right, it looks like a massive tit. Like a huge areola.
No, I'm not seeing that.
Put yours back up on screen. Maybe
Oops.
I can tell what it is. All right, hold it really still. So for those that are watching, this thing right here. Now it almost looks like a dick from your screen.
Yeah, it's not really focusing on it.
Huh. I still can't tell what it is, but... So right underneath, you have George Washington with his hands out. Right? In the photo?
Yep.
The thing
And an
that
angel
he's...
holding on to him,
The thing that he's
pulling him
sitting
up to
on.
heaven.
But the thing that he's sitting on or leaning on, it's like round, and then it's got a dark round circle, and then a darker round circle. What is that?
I mean, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but that's like his grave, and he's on top of his grave, and angels are pulling him up into heaven.
Oh, so it's supposed to
Is
be
what
a
it's
cloud,
depicting.
probably.
It may be like a cloud,
looks like a
I
tit.
guess, yeah. But I'm not exactly sure. So,
All right, then. Anyway.
this might,
Shout out to George Washington's tits.
I have a picture of it here. It might help you.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about the fact I could pull it up on my computer. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, it's a much better picture. But yeah, I mean, it looks much less like a tit now, obviously, because I can see, that it goes into an amorphous shape, but it is very unclear what it's supposed to be. I guess it's just a cloud that was weirdly shaded.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway.
So, moving on.
Question of morality.
I've got. Do what?
Question of morality.
Yeah, that's the section we're going to. And then I'm jumping into the second paragraph on page 28. Without religion, John Adams wrote Jefferson, this world would be something not fit to be mentioned in polite company. I mean hell.
I
think that's pretty
that
spot
sums
on.
it up, yeah. Do we continue
Okay.
with what he said to Benjamin Rush?
If you want to, that's all I had for there. So
Yeah, I'll read it real quick. Adams said,
All right.
religion I hold to be essential to morals. I have never read of an irreligious character in Greek or Roman history, nor in any other history, nor have I known one in life who is not a rascal. Name one if you can, living or dead. His point being that outside of religion, there were no moral guides that were sufficient. And you jumped to it before I had a chance to say it, but I think that the first sentence of this section is worth reading, and it just says, in looking to the past, the founders came to believe that religion, for all its faults, was an essential foundation for people's moral conduct and for American ideas about justice, decency, duty, and responsibility. And I think that there's no possible way to deny that. I mean, it should be something I would hope that we all universally recognize. But apparently it isn't these days. There's a lot of people that seem to think that religion is just wholly unnecessary to morality.
there's another quote from Jefferson on page 29,
Yep.
starting at the very top there, starting with on the dogmas. If you wanted to read that, or I could.
On the dogmas of religion, as distinguished from moral principles, he said, all mankind from the beginning of the world to this day have been quarreling, fighting, burning, and torturing one another for abstractions unintelligible to themselves and to all others, and absolutely beyond this comprehension of the human mind.
That's a heavy one, you know.
So the sentence before that, matter of fact, I'm gonna read the whole thing up to that quote real fast because
Okay.
I think it's worth it just for the people listening. There were times Franklin and Jefferson would have answered Hamilton in the negative. A virtuous heretic shall be saved before a wicked Christian, said Franklin. Do you believe that?
No.
You don't believe a virtuous heretic would be saved before a wicked Christian?
No, because I mean, if we're talking about a heretic as in literal definition, someone who what do you call that? Exalts or not exalts? That's the wrong. It's the opposite of what you know, says God is not real or speaks harshly against God. You know, it speaks against God. But is virtuous? No, I don't think they will get in before a wicked Christian. But it all depends on your definitions of wicked Christian and virtuous heretic, things like that, you know. Because it says clearly in the Bible that you must believe in Jesus Christ. He's the only way, the truth, the light.
In that
So
sense,
if you,
it's true. In the sense that I took it, which, to be fair, is not the direct definition of heretic. It's that somebody that, whether they believe or don't believe, somebody that doesn't outright deny God but is virtuous, basically. Meaning somebody that isn't somebody that is virtuous that isn't speaking against God, but is just not religious, let's say. That's kind of how I read it. And that could be incorrect because your definition of heretic is much more accurate. But in that sense, I believe it's true. But you might be right that if you take the literal definition of heretic as somebody that is speaking something else other than the Word of God as the Word of God, then yeah, probably not.
So further down on page 29, we've got more from Jefferson. I mean, there's a lot from Jefferson in this, but I think here it says, still on the whole, Jefferson tended to see the moral impulse as a gift of God's. The Creator would indeed have been a bungling artist had he intended man for a social animal without planting in him social dispositions. Jefferson wrote in 1814.
Huh. It is a very that might be one of his deeper quotes without it being recognized as one. Without it being recognized as one. It is a very interesting thought, and I'm sorry. The reason for the silence is it's not something I've ever considered before.
Yeah.
Because there's something that feels very narcissistic about believing that one has a natural inclination towards morality. But I've always said too. Well, I don't want to. Never mind as far as that goes, but it's almost a relief to think that there could be because it kind of takes a weight off in the sense of, well, you know, maybe I'll make a mistake, but I am inclined to do the right moral choice. When there's certain moral choices that you're laboring on that you don't know which one is correct and you don't want to make the wrong one, kind of takes a weight off in the sense that whatever you're inclined to would probably be correct. Because God designed you that way. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, moving
have
on
more
to
time on
page
that one.
30. in the middle part of page 30, he kind of talks about the Quaker William Penn.
Yep.
Haven't read much about him, but I underlined a quote here.
I know
Trying to
he's
see.
the Quaker,
Adams.
but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much more either.
Yes, I believe this is what a quote from Adams. For I am certain, it literally says, for I am certain, Adams said, there is nothing in this world worth living for but hope, and every hope will fail us. If the last hope, that of a future state, is extinguished. And I think that encompasses a lot of thoughts that I've had about, a republic if we can keep it and things like that, what the founding fathers started is something that is always worth fighting for, something to be kept alive in as much as it can be, I'm not a part of this crowd that has become to the burn it all down and start it over,
I agree 100%. I don't think that, while I do believe that it is both our constitutional right and our constitutional obligation to do that if necessary, I don't believe we're anywhere near that level of inconsistent. I shouldn't say inconsistent with our values, because I do believe we are incredibly inconsistent with our values right now, but I don't believe that the government is anywhere near that level of corruption and tyranny to need to be to need to be close to that. I think that at that point you're talking about a Hitler. At that point you're talking about a King James. You're talking about somebody that is imposing their rule on you. And as long as we're still voting in the people that are imposing their rule on us, then our system's still working. We just suck at it.
Yeah. I don't believe that. So I do believe that the Constitution has been bastardized, but I do not believe it has been bastardized to the point that we need to, rip it up and start over. I still think the core tenets are there, and the core tenets are still protecting us.
Yeah,
I do think, obviously there are certain actors that are using it for their will and not for the people's will. But at this point, we're still at a point where we can get through this peacefully if we just lock in.
And maybe, maybe there will be some strife. Maybe there will be some discomfort. I don't want to say anything too specific because who knows. But certainly we're nowhere near predicting needing revolution. Those are two very different things. But yeah, I think if anything, we need to rediscover the correct meanings of the Constitution and stuff, far from writing a new one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going to page 31, we have more quotes from Jefferson, which I think this is the main reason why I brought Chris with me, was just the amount. This guy loves Jefferson, okay? John Meacham is a lover of Jefferson.
Oh, I thought you meant me.
And Chris. Chris is both. So,
of course I am. He's the greatest founding father, obviously. He's not like that bitch Ben Franklin.
This guy. This guy. So...
there is none better.
The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time, said Jefferson. And the hand of force may destroy but cannot disjoin them. The principles of God-given life and God-given human rights are the two wings on which the nation rose and on which it still depends.
Glad you read that. I had that highlighted as well.
Yeah, we skipped over the part about Quaker William Penn, but we're kind of moving through.
It's a brief.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brief
Moving
mention.
on to section, the hand of divinity.
As far as what you just read, I don't think there's anything that we could add to that. I think that's as good as it has been said for 250 years.
he opens up talking about a quote from Alexander Hamilton: "The sacred rights of mankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written as with a sunbeam in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself." It begins to talk about the destruction of the Native American cultures, ravages of slavery, the horrors of the Civil War, and bitterness of Jim Crow.
Attest to that. Yeah. And
Yet, while
I
the
think
tides
that,
of history are infinitely complex, other major Western powers have had a worse time of it than America, and our public religion, with its emphasis on the supremacy of the individual and its cultivation of moral virtue, is one reason why. I tend to agree with that.
I absolutely agree, and I think that that what he's trying to note here is something that we've talked about before, and that is that I think the thing that Americans get the most wrong about our rights and our Constitution today is the belief that the founders wrote down these rights because they thought them important. The founders picked the rights that they picked because they believed that they were the natural inherent rights. They believed that they were the ones that God already, just by virtue of being born on this earth, if we take away all society, if we take away all government, these are the rights that exist. And I believe that we were supposed to add to them, but and that there are many that we could identify today, or at least some that we could identify furthering today. If we take the Second Amendment, for example, they think that, the founders were just worried about tyranny. They wanted to give the right to own guns to the people because they were just worried about another King James. Yes, they were absolutely worried about another King James. But I still think the Second Amendment would have existed in some form or another. It might have been written in a different wording, but it would have been the same thing ultimately, because the right that's being recognized is the fundamental right to self-defense. It is your fundamental right that if a bear attacks you, you can use whatever is at your disposal to attack the bear back. If a human attacks you, same story. And they were looking at it through a context of tyranny, but that is the right that is ultimately being protected. It's not just the gun ownership. They connected it to gun ownership because that was the most effective means available at the time. But it did not, there's a reason they said arms and not guns. And the way that Americans see that as a right that the founders thought was important and thus gave to us, instead of the founders recognized that your fundamental right to say whatever you feel like, to defend yourself and stay alive, essentially, existed beyond all of this. It's like the most inherent thing that makes us American, and so many of us get that wrong.
Mm-hmm. Moving on, page 32, the second paragraph here. To argue against a role for faith in politics is essentially futile. The more useful enterprise is to ask first what kind of religion, either public or private, is at work in a given situation, and if it is predominantly private, how much that religious thought or belief ought to shape one's opinion or vote. And then he begins to talk about some the public square, and then abortion rights and fetal stem cell research, and then comes down to the end of the second or third paragraph here, second full paragraph. How much weight should politicians and judges give such theological views? In other words, how much religion is too little, just right, or too much in politics and legislating and policy making? The American experience suggests that religious conviction should be a factor, but not the dominant one in many such difficult arenas of life and law. So I think he poses a pretty good question there.
Yeah.
how much or how little should religion have an effect on politics? You know, I think we've kind of discussed it a little bit through here, but you know.
Well, and that's ultimately what he intends to answer in the rest of the book. I think maybe we should wait to put any final words on that until we get his final words on it.
We've got
what I would say about
pages to
that
the
is
end of
anybody
the introduction.
Anybody that is following with this and would like to follow up with the future episodes, consider that over the next couple weeks. Consider what the right amount is in your view, and then hear what our opinions are as we get to that, and go from there.
Did you have anything left in that section before we move on to the test of a life?
No, I think we can.
All right.
I had a couple quotes, but nothing that fundamentally changes what we've already said.
Yeah, it begins to talk about Jefferson's death again. And so I'll move on through that. So this is the second paragraph of page 34. We're almost to the end here, so I'm just going to kind of read through here. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson had talked with each other about those regions of the afterlife, and Jefferson believed that one's works, not adherence to a particular faith, determined one's future fate. I must ever believe that religion substantially good, which produces an honest life, he wrote. But traditional Christians still thought Jefferson unsound.
Fair enough. To be fair, those traditional Christians were taught under the crown.
Yes. Because I believe Puritans were the ones, basically the ones that adhered to the rule of King George, you know, his interpretation of things, the British church, you know.
Okay.
And then Quakers, separatists. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. That was the other type of Christian that came over, separatists, because they were still fully Christian. They just didn't believe in
King James's church,
the Church of Britain.
Right.
So they separated themselves from the main sect. The main obviously way of following was the Church of Britain. You kind of followed what they did. And so you had the separatists, and then Quakers were kind of a separatist. They didn't really adhere to the Britain church. But anyways, finally got that.
You got there.
He begins talking about in 1816 at Monticello, Jefferson received a letter from an old friend, Margaret Bayard Smith. She was an author who was a fixture in Washington society from the time of her move to the capital as a new wife in the last months of the Adams presidency in 1800 until her death in the last year of John Tyler's presidency in 1844.
She was hot for Jefferson.
That's what it. Next thing it says, Mrs. Smith was a fervent admirer of Jefferson's. So she cried that it might be the last time in this world, at least, that I shall ever see you, but there is another world, prompting Jefferson to calm her, saying, God bless you, dear madam, God bless you. And so the last thing that I had highlighted of this entire introduction is a quote from Jefferson, of course.
Yeah.
I never told my religion, nor scrutinized that of another, Jefferson wrote. I never attempted to make a convert nor wish to change another's creed. I have ever judged of the religion of others by their lives. For Jefferson, liberty and religion, freedom and God, and goodness and faith were intertwined, each an indissoluble element in the American experiment. And that closes up the introduction. And I mean,
Yeah, I find
we'll move us on to chapter 1. And so far, like I said at the beginning, I think he's got some interesting ideas. And of course, I agree with him in some spots, and I don't so much agree with him in others. So I think this is, I mean, so far been a very good read. And so I think it will continue to be at least interesting and worth talking about. And who knows, maybe after we're done, we'll try to get in contact with him and see if he'll come on the podcast just for an interview and give us more of a, you know, one-on-one experience. But, you know, I never know.
perhaps so, but don't hold your breath.
Yeah. So if you guys like that, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, tell your mama about me. MillerTalk_pod on X, MillerTalk.substack.com. And Chris.
X.com/JBU_show. Rumble.com/user/just between us. And don't forget, you can go on to the Rumble page, go to any of the shows, click on the Discord link below, and join the conversation with us live anytime that we are on the air and not hosting another guest.
Yep. And yeah, if you're kind of liking this, and you want to get the book, again, American Gospel by John Meacham, especially since we did this live, you might be tuning in later. I got this on Amazon, so I'm sure you can find it in other places, but there's many places to find books. If you want to read along with us and get the full, because we can't, I would love to sit here and basically do an audiobook where I stop and pause after, you know, every 2 or 3 paragraphs and kind of talk about what was just said, but that would be copyright infringement. So we're kind of just picking things here and there to talk about in particular to kind of avoid any copyright infringement. So if you want to read the entire thing and get the full scope, you'll have to buy the book yourself and read along with us.
Yep.
Unfortunately. Or I would let you listen to my beautiful voice.
You might be able to, you know, if you were to search the book .pdf on Google, you might happen to find it at a great discount on a few websites, but
You could.
that's what I've heard. I don't know.
There's used booksellers too if you can't afford a new one.
Yeah. It's a fairly common book. It's not.
Or maybe you
super
can rent
old
it
or
from your
anything,
local
so-
library. They might have it there, you know,
Ah,
and read along with us.
ah. Not in Washington.
But yeah, I think this is fun. It's pretty, you know, like I had told Chris when I proposed this to him, Dr. Andrew Huberman has said, and I've also been told by other people in my life, the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone. So in order to help me learn and hopefully give you you the viewer a chance to learn something too, I thought this would be a great idea. And so
You want to end the show with some advice?
sure.
You've been holding on to that for a while, but we haven't actually done it. Do you have anything prepared?
I don't have my notebook next to me.
If not, I can bring something up, but
Yeah, you can go ahead.
okay.
I have to go get my notebook, and that would be it. I don't know where I put it.
I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I just, if you had
Yeah.
something. But anyway, I think what we could talk about then this episode would be the importance of male relationships for young men.
It's very important.
There you go. See, that was easy. Why is it important?
Because iron sharpens iron, and so one man sharpens another.
100%. And that is, I think, also, it just know, too, it's something that women generally will not understand and will not appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
But it is important. And really, that's the best reason because, well, that's one of two reasons, I think. The other reason is there has to be somebody. You have to have somebody that you can fully trust. And when, that's your wife once you're married, but it can be a friend too, and should be a friend too. There should be at least one. Now, more than one is great, but there should be at least one. Because for one, you're probably not married now, or there at least is going to be a time when you're not one way or another. And therefore, you don't want to go, you don't want to have to go looking then. But the difference it is in the mindset of a person, and I would say the general mental welfare of a person in having somebody that they can completely and fully trust. Not just to tell things to, but to call you out on shit too, which is why, a male friend is important specifically. It's the only way I can describe it is the same way I describe people having kids. Like, you can live a happy, full life without kids. But once you have a kid, what you realize is it takes you to this whole new section you could not recognize was available before that. And so as long as you don't know what it is, and you can't know what it is without having a kid, it's fine. But once you know it's there, you see why you can never go back, I guess is the way to put it. And I think that having at minimum one solid male friend that is honest with you, you're honest with him, it strengthens you, and it provides something that literally nothing else can fill. That's what I'm trying to say. There's nothing that can replace that.
Yeah. And I don't always recommend it, but if it is, the last resort of anything, get a therapist. It's better if you have just a friend. It's kind of a mutual agreement between the two of you. But if all else has failed and you for some reason can't make a friend like that, getting a therapist to kind of fill that role until you do find a friend or something is good.
Yeah, I don't disagree that it is a possible solution. However, I do think you need to be extremely selective today when getting a therapist, or a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't remember which is which, but there is obviously, I mean, that is probably one of the worst medical fields as far as indoctrination. And so it could vary. The problem is the risk of getting somebody that ends up hurting the course of your life more than helping is really high. So I do agree that a good therapist is, it's somebody you can fully trust, generally speaking, and can become a friend even. But you got to be extremely selective in doing it, is the only thing I would caution.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I don't think so, man. This was fun. I hope everyone else enjoyed.
I hope so too. And we'll try it again once we read a little more. Where is
Next will
the
be in chapter 1. I'm not sure how long chapter 1 is because I haven't finished it, so I don't know if there's going to be 2 parts or not, but the overall book is a fairly short book. 250 pages isn't a very long book, so.
No, that's not bad. All right. Well, in that case, my name is
I'm
Chris.
Austin.
It takes a random amount of time, and it doesn't. I don't know. This has been the JBU show, Miller Talk.
And Miller Talk Live.
Something.
And what did we call it?
Bye 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 bye.
History Night with 2 losers.
History of the
I
Patriots.
just want to be a little bit louder.
Yeah.
This is only between us.
This is just between us.
This is just between us.
Perfect. All right. Later, guys.